I find video game development in the 80s and 90s particularly interesting for a few different reasons. For one, the market was much smaller. There was no guarantee that games were going to be the massively successful industry they are today. It was a bit of a gamble, and I'm sure back in the day, telling family or friends that you make video games for a living might make some of them raise an eyebrow. Another reason is the internet hadn't become so ubiquitous. Nowadays, we know how games look years before they're close to being done. We have people nitpicking the sounds of guns in games or boat animations months before the game even goes gold. We also see many leaks a year instead of things staying private like they should. Lastly, and most importantly for today's topic, there weren't many gaming celebrities back then. Icons like Hideo Kojima, Eiji Aonuma, or Todd Howard were obviously still working in the industry, but the spotlight on them wasn't the way it is today. All of these factors mean that even if you worked on a big video game, back in the day you could still pretty much quit the gaming industry and disappear completely. A lot of developers, even ex-devs, have some sort of social media presence today. But these three game directors that I'm about to talk about, I find so fascinating, not only because they have no trace online, no social media, but also because the games they worked on, directed, are extremely well known. These games are all still talked about today. So it's doubly shocking to me that somebody who not only worked on, but directed such legendary titles seemingly quit the industry and has never even done an interview afterwards. For this list, I'm simply going to go in order from what I expect to be the least known games to the most known games. Let's begin. Nihon Falcom is a relatively small Japanese video game company, well known for their long-standing roots in the role-playing genre. Despite getting more popular globally in the mid-2000s thanks to the internet, they're still a bit of a niche company. They're mostly known for two series: Ys, which is an action role-playing series that began in 1987. The other series is Trails, a spin-off of their Legend of Heroes games, which began in 1989. Depending on who you ask, Ys is quite possibly the most important action Japanese role-playing game series ever. In 1986, Tomoyoshi Miyazaki joined Nihon Falcom, and it only took him 1 year to not only write, but co-create the Ys series along with Masaya Hashimoto. After only 3 years at Nihon Falcom, and just a few months before the launch of Ys 3, the two of them decided to leave and start their own gaming company known as Quintet. Doing some digging through interviews and some light research, I found out that Ys 3 wasn't even meant to be a mainline Ys game. It wasn't even supposed to be an Ys game at all. I also found some complaints with the company president at the time. So being unhappy with their boss, the apparent creative restrictions, and reported low salaries at the time, most of the staff was irritated. Thus the birth of Quintet. Quintet is well known for developing some of the finest games on the Super Nintendo, such as ActRaiser, Illusion of Gaia, and Terranigma, but they've also done some other work like support on development of Shenmue. Tomoyoshi Miyazaki had key roles in all of these games, such as writer, designer, and for Terranigma specifically, writer and director. So after all of that work, and once again co-creating the Ys series, it's safe to say that he was becoming a modern legend along with Masaya Hashimoto. And yet, his last credit on a game was in 2006 on an RPG that I don't even want to try to pronounce. Quintet unfortunately just slowly disappeared. I couldn't find any statement that officially said the company had been closed down. All I found out was that the forums on their official website were closed down after the company officially stated in 2008 that they had no news on upcoming games. And later, in 2008, the website as a whole was taken down. But still, no official announcement on what exactly happened to the company has ever been released. In 2021, a remake of ActRaiser called ActRaiser Renaissance was released by Square Enix, which raised some eyebrows. Does this mean that Square owns all of the Quintet IP? What about others, such as Illusion of Gaia or Terranigma? In December of that same year, an interview with manga artist Kamui Fujiwara was released. Fujiwara had some limited experience designing characters for a few video games, one of them being Terranigma. When asked if he had any contact with any of the old Quintet staff, he said,
"I don't know about Quintet, but I contacted the scenario writer and the composer once on Twitter. I don't know about the director, Mr. Tomoyoshi Miyazaki, because he seems to have disappeared. Probably the reason why the game has not been remade nor got subsequently sold. is because Mr. Miyazaki cannot be contacted.
That was the last time Tomoyoshi Miyazaki's name got any sort of spotlight. I couldn't find any news or articles relating to him in the last year, and just to be sure, I tried searching for an obituary, but I couldn't find anything. There were some rumors that he left gaming to start another business like a pachinko parlor, and it failed. There were also some rumors that he got tied up in some shady business and was killed. There's a book called The Untold History of Japanese Game Developers where very briefly the same thing occurred in an interview. The interviewer asks somebody about Miyazaki and Hashimoto, even addressing certain rumors, like one of them being arrested and the other being killed. The person being interviewed laughs the rumors off and says that honestly, they have no clue what happened to either of them. And just like that, two gaming legends faded into obscurity. All throughout the 1990s, there was no role-playing series with more prestige than Final Fantasy. You could argue Dragon Quest, but with rare exception, Dragon Quest is a series that satisfies a mostly gameplay-driven audience, whereas Final Fantasy satisfied a larger audience with its captivating stories. In the credits of Final Fantasy VI, under Battle Planner, is a man named Yasuyuki Hasabe. 2 years later, Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars would release on the Super Nintendo, and Hasabe had the same role, a battle planner and designer. To say that these two games are some of the most famous JRPGs ever made would be an understatement, but it seems towards the late 90s, Hasabe must have left Square and went to Sony, where he was tasked with creating a game that would dethrone his old series, Final Fantasy. He is credited with his contributions towards the story, overall game design, and most importantly, directing the 1999 cult classic The Legend of Dragoon, a game I covered on this channel. This is the last credit Yasuyuki Hasabe would have on a video game. Much like Tomoyoshi Miyazaki, he worked on some extremely important video games, starting your career with Final Fantasy VI and only 2 games later gaining enough respect to direct your own RPG is impressive. Much like with Miyazaki, when you Google his name, you'll find his Moby Games page and a couple of threads of people asking where they went. I found this article through Reddit, written by user QJin, which, when translated, points Hasabe to working for an IT company named Soliton Systems as an executive officer. Unfortunately, their main source of evidence that this is the same Yasuyuki Hasabe is that they have similar faces, given a few decades of age. Probably not the best evidence. So what do you think? Is this the same man? Did he trade being a director for an at the time huge video game for IT work? Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Everybody knows Kirby. It's hard not to love him. His games are usually relaxing with layers upon layers of adorable imagery. From 1995 to 2000, there were 3 Kirby games that made up a trilogy that the fans called the Dark Matter Trilogy, named after the reoccurring villain in those specific games. This trilogy is known for a few standout elements, like the animal companions who can change up Kirby's core gameplay. Dreamland 2 is one of the best Kirby games ever, and Kirby 64 is my absolute favorite, so it's fair to say that I'm quite fond of this trilogy. Shinichi Shimomura is the man who directed all 3 games in the Dark Matter trilogy. He did some work on the Kirby spin-offs beforehand, like Dream Course and Pinball Land. His last credit was in 2002, directing the remake of Kirby's Adventure, Nightmares in Dreamland, which is also an excellent game. We all know that out of any of the big gaming companies, Nintendo is the most protective of their IP, so it was a big deal that the series was essentially being trusted to just one man after 1995. If you look up his name, you'll once again find dozens of threads asking where this man is. There are tons of rumors, like he simply quit after not getting the promotion he wanted, and he now lives a quiet life offline. Of course, there are theories that he died, but I couldn't find an obituary from 2003, which is the rumored year of his passing. Some other interesting theories are that the name was simply a fake name used by other big shots at Nintendo, like Shigesato Itoi or Satoru Iwata, but those theories have all been but debunked. It was even a fairly big deal in the community just to find a picture of the guy a few years ago. The reason I find all 3 of these men interesting, 4 if you count Masaya Hashimoto, is the video game industry only continued to get bigger and bigger, more and more successful. All of these guys were making a great name for themselves. creating the most famous action RPG from Japan, working on Final Fantasy VI, Super Mario RPG, and making a first-party game for Sony, directing 4 games for one of Nintendo's biggest IPs. These 3 men weren't nobodies, and if they were still working on games today, they easily could have been legends, and yet they disappeared. What do you think? Did they pass away? Did they simply quit and live a more normal life with days of video game development only in their memories? Thank you so much for watching.